Chapter 37, EO, Go, and Time and Place Constructions. Chapter 37 covers the following: the formation of the irregular verb EO, meaning go, and constructions for place and time in Latin. At the end of the lesson, we'll review the vocabulary which you should memorize in this chapter. There are 4 important rules to remember in this chapter. Rule 1. The base of EO, meaning go, is the letter I or the letter E. Rule 2. The ablative case shows place from which and point in time. Rule 3. The accusative case shows place to which and duration of time. And Rule 4. The locative case shows place at which and is used mainly with points on the map, that is, cities and small islands. The irregular Latin verb eo, iri, iwi, or ii, itum, means go. In many languages, probably most of them, the basic verb that signals motion or going is irregular. For instance, the past tense of English go is went, a form borrowed from a different verb, wend, which you may have heard in the old phrase, wend your way home, meaning take a path, often a leisurely and circuitous one. So, English go and went are part of a composite conjugation. Latin eo is not. Even though the base varies, it's mostly I, but sometimes E. Those are just alternative forms of the same root, not different verbs glued together. What's at issue in eo is that this is another athematic verb. Many of its forms have no thematic vowel, which means the base runs directly into the endings, and that can cause problems in pronunciation. But actually with eo, there aren't that many problems because the base, which is a vowel, the letter I or E, accords quite nicely with the personal endings and tense markers, most of which begin with consonants. All the same, having no thematic vowel grated on the Roman ear. And when we joined Latin during the Classical Age, the Romans were in the process of regularizing eo by adding in thematic vowels. To wit, in the third-person plural present form eunt, they go, the u, compare agunt, has been added in even though it serves no purpose phonologically or grammatically. It just looked more regular to the Romans that way. Thus, trying to squeeze eo into a conjugation is pointless, since conjugations are determined by their thematic vowel. If anything, eo shows strong affinities with third and fourth, but some of its forms look first or second. Categorically, it's a mutt. But if its formation is messy, its expectation is simple. There isn't one. No direct or indirect objects with eo. You can't go something or for something. Okay, yes, you can in English. You can say he went crazy or went for it, but neither crazy nor for it in those English idioms is an object. The crazy in go crazy is a predicate adjective, so go is a linking verb there. It's another way of saying become, an English idiom. Eo doesn't work that way in Latin, so don't worry about that. And for it in go for it isn't an indirect object, but a construction showing motion towards, meaning head in that direction. The Romans could say that, but not with the dative case. In Latin or any language, what typically follows a verb of motion like go is a motion construction, something like place to or from which. We'll talk about those in a moment. The gist of all of this here is, if you're asked for the expectation of a form of eo, say nothing. Yes, there are things that follow eo, but they're not objects as such. Nothing that depends on the verb itself, the way an accusative direct object depends on a transitive verb. Okay, fine. If it rankles you to say there's nothing after eo when in fact there is often something after it, and you really want to cite some sort of expectation for this verb, then go ahead and put plus, place, to, or from which. But be sure you know that if there happens to be an accusative after -o, it indicates place to which. That accusative is not a direct object. You don't go the movies, direct object. You go to them, place to which. Here's a chart showing the present system of -o. In the indicative, the I base dominates most of the forms. It shows up in the infinitive ire, too, which means the imperfect subjunctive will have an I, irem, ires, iret, and so on. The imperatives e and ite also use the I base, as does the present participle eanes, in its nominative singular at least. The base changes to the letter e, when it comes in front of any vowel except e. Latin doesn't like having two e's in a row. Thus, -o and -eunt, I go and they go, in the present indicative. The e appears also in the present subjunctive, -am, -as, -at, etc., and in the participle after the nominative singular eanes, where it becomes -euntis, -eunti, and so on. As we just noted, what conjugation to assign -o to is unclear. Most of the forms resemble third or fourth more than first or second, except the future, ebo, ebis, ebit, and so on, which looks first or second. In the end, trying to pound this round verb into any square conjugation is a fool's errand. There are too many irregularities and not enough forms to make a clear pattern, which is good. There isn't that much to learn, so go learn it. The perfect of -o presents no such challenges. It's all but completely regular. Take the base e or iwa and add endings. For instance, it or ewit, meaning he came, or erant, they had come. There's only one problem here. When the double I's appear in front of S, they tend to conflate into one I, producing isti, meaning you went, and ise, to have gone, minor anomaly. What's much more important is how productive -o is in creating compounds. Think about it. Go naturally attracts directional affixes. Go forth, from, in, out, under, over, toward, closer. No, that's too close. Back, go back. 3 of these compounds are in the vocabulary. They're asterisked below. So, for example, -o, go away or depart. -o, go back or return. -o, go forward or advance. Take note of the D that keeps the vowel at the end of pro and re from melting into the E at the start of -o and turning into something incomprehensible like preo or reo. Here's another compound of -o, a very popular one, -o, go to or approach. Also, -o, go before or precede. Pri--o's okay, but pro-*o isn't. Fine. How about co-*o, go or come together, or assemble. Sub-*o, go under, or undergo. Pair-*o, literally go thoroughly, meaning go all the way, that is, die. Think English pass on, pass away. We'll talk about this more in the vocabulary. And finally, inter-*o, literally go between, that is, go between life and death. In other words, die. Ugh, enough going. Let's end the grammar of this chapter by looking at how Latin expresses constructions describing motion or location, to, at, from, and the like. This may come as a bit of a surprise to you, perhaps even a shock, but there's a whole case we haven't talked about yet. Yes, a case. You thought Latin had 6. Nope, bad news. There's 7. Indo-European had like 10, so show a little gratitude to Rome here. Here, yeah, that's the case. the locative. It's used to show the place of an event, its location. Locative, location. That shouldn't be too hard to learn. English prepositions like in or at are the closest equivalent to the Latin locative and should be used to translate it. Here's the good news. You're not going to have to learn any new case endings here. Not even one single one for the locative. Not in all 5 declensions, singular or plural. Locative endings look like other endings. Why? The Romans didn't use the locative that much, only with special types of nouns, so it couldn't support a lot of irregularity. In fact, during the classical age, they were in the process of getting rid of the locative altogether and constructing new ways of expressing location or place where, using prepositions mostly. So Wheelock's not playing some horrible trick on you by holding off a whole case until you're almost done with Latin grammar. He's right not to introduce the locative before now, since it's very predictable and rarely used, almost never with anything but place names, and at that, not all place names, only points on the map, that is towns or villages, not countries or provinces or even districts, just cities and islands, small islands. Capri, for instance, a tiny island off the coast of Naples, not big islands like Sicily. So the locative of Rome is Romae, meaning at Rome. Athenis is the locative of Athens, meaning in Athens. Because there are no new endings used to create the locative, you just have to learn which endings certain nouns use to form their locative. If a noun is first or second declension singular, its locative will look like its genitive singular. For instance, Romae, meaning at or in Rome. Roma is first declension. Or Corinthi, meaning at or in Corinth, which comes from Corinthus, Corinthi, second declension. Corinth is a city in central Greece. If a noun belongs to any other category, like third declension, or if it's plural, its locative looks like its ablative. For example, Carthaginae, meaning in Carthage, from Carthago Carthaginus, third declension. Or Athenis, meaning at Athens, from Athenae Athenarum, which is first declension, but plural. And because home also qualifies as a point on the map, the Latin word for house or home, domus, a singular noun of the second declension, well, it's second declension sometimes, let's talk about that in a moment, has a locative domi, meaning at home, a form that looks like the genitive. Learn domi at home. You see it a lot in Latin. All in all, this means there's a new piece of grammar I can ask you. I can underline a locative form and ask what case and why. If so, answer locative place where. There's no other answer for locative. But of course, being in a place is not the only way to describe your location. You can go to or from it. What case do you think Latin uses to show motion toward? What case regularly receives action, like the action of any verb? The accusative, of course. And that's exactly how Latin shows place to which. That is, the destination where someone's going. And just like with the locative, if that place is a point on the map, no preposition is necessary. For instance, Romam, meaning to Rome, or Athenas, meaning to Athens. If it's a country you're going to, however, use ad or in, as in ad Italiam, meaning to Italy, or in Asiam, meaning into Asia. Conversely, if someone's going away from somewhere, what case do you think Latin will use? That's right, the ablative. And again, no preposition if the place from which is a point on the map. Roma, for instance, meaning from Rome, or Athenis, meaning from Athens. But, same as before, if the place is bigger than a point on the map, use a preposition like ab, ex, or de, as in ex Italia, meaning out of Italy, or ab Asia, meaning away from Asia. These same rules also apply to the noun domus, meaning home. So, domum means to home or just home. Note that English can leave the to out too. I went home means I went to home, or domo meaning from home. Neither to nor from requiring a preposition in Latin. So, a Roman went domum, home or to home, stayed a few hours domi, at home, and later departed domo, from home. The final nugget of grammar in this chapter concerns time constructions. That is, how to say when or for how long something happened. You'll remember from ubi, which means both when and where, that the Romans conflated time and place more easily and more often than we do. After all, if you want to meet people somewhere, you need to know both the place and the time they'll be there. So it's only natural that ubi est convivium should mean both where and when is the party. Thus, time and place constructions were really part and parcel of one larger construct in the Roman mind. It will come as no surprise either, then, that the grammatical constructions look a lot like each other in Latin. Much as the locative does in space, the ablative shows point in time. Remember that quite a few locative forms are identical with their ablative counterparts. So, just as the locative shows the place where you are, the ablative shows where you are chronologically. I hope this isn't news. We studied the ablative of time way back in chapter 15, where you learned that the English prepositions which best convey the same sense as the ablative of time are in, within, on, or at. So, for instance, tempore illo means at that time. Conversely, and in some respects its opposite, the accusative shows duration of time, to which the closest preposition equivalents in English are for or during. For example, horam unam, for or during 1 hour. And that's it. We're done with the grammar in this chapter. Now, let's explore the vocabulary. The first word of which is Athenai, Athenarum, feminine, meaning Athens, the city in Greece. It's a first declension, plural noun. That's right, it's plural. No one can ever stop at just one Athen. We today have many examples of cities with plural names. Can you think of any? How about Fairbanks, Grand Rapids, Twin Falls? And if you translate names from Spanish, a language I prefer to call modern Latin, Los Angeles, meaning the angels, Buenos Aires, good airs. There are many more examples. The next word is important. It's used a lot. Domus, domus, or domi, feminine, meaning house or home. It's fourth or occasionally second declension, feminine. When a noun jumps back and forth between two different declensional systems, it's called heteroclite, meaning declining clite in two different ways, hetero. In this case, fourth and second declension, both of which begin with a nominative singular ending us, so it's easy to see how a word can slip back and forth between them. But that doesn't mean the forms are evenly divided. Domus is way more fourth than second, and because of that, there are a number of mandatory long marks. Indeed, 3 domuses, as one would expect to see in fourth declension: the genitive singular, the nominative plural, and the accusative plural. Second declension's contribution is limited to 3 alternative forms, both the genitives, domi and domorum, and the ablative singular, domo. The 2 remaining forms, the nominative singular domus and the accusative singular domum, can be categorized as either fourth or second. So if it weren't for the 3 second declension forms, domus could be classified as entirely happily fourth. Problem is, the locative, at home, is always domi, never domus, and the ablative of place from which, from home, is always domo, never domu. Domu and domus are employed with other ablative and genitive usages. So it's really the place constructions that are keeping the second declension forms of domus alive. Get rid of them, and you get rid of heteroclite, which is exactly what later Italians did. Good for them. In Indo-European languages, the base underlying this word can show up as dem, dom, or just dm. It's given us, for instance, Latin-based derivatives like dome, domicile, domestic, and dominate, all having to do with house or forcing the wilderness out of something so it's safe to keep it in your house. That forcing sense shows up strong in the Greek word despotes, meaning master, potes, of the house, des, from which we get our word despot. But what happened to Indo-European D as it evolved in English? Remember Grimm's Law? It changed to T. Thus, in our world, dm became tm, giving us words like think about animals. Add a vowel. If animals live in your house and don't bite you, they're tame. And what about wood? What if you bring wood inside your house? What is it then? Try a different vowel. Tum, tem, tim. Tim. Try tim. Timber. Timber's literally house wood. It's a wild tree that's been tamed and taken inside a house. Next word, frater, fratris masculine, meaning brother. It's a third declension masculine noun. Note that the base contracts, fratra, and it's not I stem. So what's the genitive plural? Yes, fratrum, manus fratrum, a band of brothers. The next word is Roma, Romi feminine, meaning guess. It's first declension feminine. Following that is an adjective, gratus a meaning pleasant, agreeable, or grateful. It's first second declension. From its meaning, it expects a dative after it. Pleasing to, a dative with certain adjectives. The next word is an adverb, deinde, meaning thereupon, next, or then. It never changes form. Isn't that lovely? And here's a word you already know, ut, but being used in a new sense. When, since, or as. It takes on that sense when the verb inside its clause is indicative. Yep, that's right. Ut can take the indicative, not just the subjunctive. That's not so lovely, huh? This point of syntax really shouldn't be sequestered in the vocabulary. It's a major element of Latin grammar and is seen not infrequently. So if I underline an indicative verb inside an ut clause and ask you what mood and why, you should say indicative in an ut clause meaning when, since, or as. For instance, venit ut me videbat, meaning he came when he saw me. The implication being that he did actually see me. It's a fact, at least as far as the speaker is concerned, so the indicative is the appropriate mood to use. Conversely, venit ut me videret is a purpose clause, meaning he came in order to see me. The subjunctive here reflects the uncertainty lurking behind any purpose clause, since it's always possible the intention expressed in the purpose clause was not fulfilled. He came in order to see me doesn't mean he did see me, only that he wanted to. In sum, with the subjunctive, I'm not saying what I'm saying is a fact. With the indicative, I am. That's why ut can have these two very different senses. Now let's go on to go. Eo, iri, ii, or iwi, itum. Latin attests two perfect active bases, e and iw, which appear to have been interchangeable. And as we noted above, eo's an irregular verb, a blend of athematic, third or fourth, and first-second conjugation forms, which in the end you just have to memorize. You'll find the same is true of the verb for go in almost every language, certainly all the ones I'm familiar with. Remember, the reason for this is that the more often a word is used, the more likely it is to be irregular. And take my word for it, go is used a lot. The perfect passive participle itum is supplied here mainly to show you how to form the future active participle iturum, which Latin needs when it says will or would in indirect statement. Sentences like I said I would go are common expressions in Latin or any language. There is, of course, no true passive of eo. Let us be goed? Count me out. Next on this vocabulary list is a compound of eo, abeo, abiri, abii, abitum, meaning go away or depart. It's ab, meaning from, plus eo, meaning go. So memorizing this one shouldn't pose any problems. Note Latin doesn't use eo's alternative perfect active form iwi with this compound. Abeo's perfect is always abii. And after departure naturally comes death. Per eo, per ire, per ii, or per iwi. This one does use both alternative perfect forms, peritum, meaning pass away, be destroyed, perish, or die. The per prefix here means thoroughly. So to go thoroughly connoted to the Romans to die, in much the same way we say pass on or pass away. And here's another compound of eo, redeo, redire, redii, or redivi. This one also uses both alternatives in the perfect. Reditum, meaning go back or return. The next word is another verb, interficio, interficere, interfeci, interfectum, meaning kill or murder. It's third io. Literally, it means make, ficio, between, inter, with a sense, create a division, in this case, between life and death. So, to interficere someone was to separate that person from the living, in which case he inter-eod. Here's another verb, licet, licere, licuit, meaning it is permitted, one may. Its second conjugation. This is an important verb of a type we haven't dealt with much, but which is a big part of Latin. Licet is an impersonal verb, meaning its subject is always it, so it's always third person singular and active. But while it remains constant in person, number, and voice, it can, and often does, change tense and mood. And please be aware that it has infinitives and participle forms too. So, what does licabit mean? Yes, it will be permitted. Don't try putting one may in the future. When changing tenses with this verb, stick to be permitted. And what does licanes licentis mean? That's the present participle, isn't it? Latin nt equals what in English? ing. So how do you translate licanes? Permitted, or being permitted, that is, free, as in, being permitted or free to leave, he fled the country. The base underlying licet also produced our Latin derivative license, which is just another word for freedom, or nothing left to lose. Licet expects two constructions after it. One, a dative plus an infinitive, for instance, licet ei redire, meaning it is permitted for him to return, or he may return. The other is a subjunctive verb. It can have an ut preceding it, but it doesn't have to. For example, licet redeat, or ut redeat. The meaning is the same whether you use a subjunctive or a dative plus infinitive. But there is a difference worth noting in the grammar of the subjunctive clauses. Without the ut, the construction is essentially paratactic. Literally, it is permitted, let him return. With the ut, it's syntactic, creating a clause that, you should note, follows sequence of tenses. The next word is another verb, soleo, solere, solitus sum, meaning be accustomed. It's a second conjugation, semi-deponent verb, meaning in the present tense system it's regular, but its perfect forms are deponent. Like audeo, audere, ausis sum, it has no true passive in any tense. So it has half the forms of a regular verb, if that's any consolation. Its meaning be accustomed naturally expects a complementary infinitive. You're accustomed to do something, but translating it that way can prove cumbersome. The Romans used this verb where we are more accustomed to saying usually. So, usually can be another way of translating soleo if you're careful always to make the Latin complementary infinitive an English finite form. So, for example, hic venire solebat, meaning literally, he was accustomed to come here, can also be rendered, he usually came here. And the last word on this vocabulary list is Syracusae, Syracusarum, feminine, meaning Syracuse, a major port city in southeastern Sicily. It's a first declension feminine noun that's always plural, another of those plural place names like White Sands or Los Alamos. Do the rules that were cited at the beginning of this chapter now make sense to you? If not, please review this presentation. If so, please proceed to the next slide. For the next class meeting, please bring in a copy of the practice and review sentences for Chapter 37 on page 180 of Wheelock's text. To end this lesson, let's review motion constructions by taking a short tour of the Roman Empire, starting in Rome, of course. How does Latin say in Rome? Remember the rule for the locative. If a word is first or second declension and singular, the locative looks like what case? The genitive. So what's the genitive, and thus locative also, of Roma? Romae. Now let's head out of Rome. How does Latin say from Rome? What case is used to show motion away from? The ablative. And does Roma use a preposition to show place from which? No, this is a city, a point on the map. So, no preposition. What's the ablative of Roma? Roma. And now that we've left Rome, let's go to Athens. How would Latin say to Athens? What case is used to show motion towards? The accusative. And will Latin use a preposition here? No, not with a point on the map. Remember, it's plural, so Athenas. And now we're in Athens. What's that in Latin? Athenae is plural, so the locative looks like what case? The ablative. And what's the ablative of Athenae? Athenes. But it's time to go. Departing from Athens? How does Latin say that? Preposition? No. So, Athenes. It looks exactly like the locative. Context will tell whether at or from makes better sense. Heading now to Syracuse. What would that be in Latin? Another plural name, isn't it? Syracusas. In Syracuse? Plural, so the locative will look like the genitive or the ablative. Which one? The ablative. So, Syracusis. From Syracuse? That will be Syracusis too. To Carthage, then. Carthago, Carthaginus, so it's third declension. What case indicates toward? The accusative. What's the accusative singular ending in third? em, so Carthaginem. In Carthage? Is the locative equal to the genitive or the ablative here? The ablative. Carthago is not first or second declension. So what's its ablative singular? Carthagine. From Carthage? You figure it out. That's right. Carthagine again, just like the locative in form. Again, context will clarify which is meant. And back to Rome. Rome, sweet home. Go ahead, get yourself back there on your own. Yes, Romam dulcem domum. And now that we're back in Italy, how does Latin say that? In Italy. Can you use the locative with big places, not points on the map? No. So, in Italy, you'll have to use a preposition. So, in Italia. And that's the end of our tour. Mihi placatut domum salvi redieretis, O Romani.